Welcome to part 2 of this tutorial series on database querying with R. Here we're going to go over some of the basic steps of getting R set up on your computer. Hopefully you'll have at least some familiarity with that, but otherwise these instructions will really get you set up. So first off, what are these documents that I'm reading? So far in this one and the last one, it looks like I'm just looking at a web page. If you go to the GitHub repository, you'll see that for each one of these pages, there is a file called .rmd and a file that ends in .html. So the HTML pages are what you're looking at. You just open it in your browser, it's a static page, it's nicely formatted, and it has these code chunks that are here in the gray boxes. So this is what you could type into the R console or in an R script, and then this shows you what output you would get from running this function, unless it doesn't show any output in some cases. However, the RMD files you open in RStudio. And of course I'll get into installing RStudio in just a second. But so there you'll see code formatted, and then you'll see these boxes that look like this with these backticks and R and then the code, and then it'll have a little gear icon and a down arrow and a play button. And if you click the play button, it will run everything that's in this chunk and then display the output immediately beneath it. So let me show you what that looks like. So for example, this is the same document we were just looking at. I've got my header here, I've got the links, I've got the intro text, and then this actually looks really terrible just because, you know, it's formatted to look nice in the HTML, but this is the exact same chunk I was just reading. And so an example of what the code and output look like are, you know, maybe here where I've got, you know, number of plots and this is some code and I could hit this play button and then this output would pop up underneath it. But that's just a preview of what's coming next in the series. So if you want to follow along, I recommend, you know, you can just read these documents. But you can also open those RMD files in RStudio, follow along with this, kind of play around with the code as you're working on it, and see what the various outputs are. So for downloading R, there are a bunch of mirrors for it. I think the one that is sort of the fastest is the one provided by RStudio. So right here, you just click download R for your respective platform. And then, you know, kind of just the basic defaults is all you need. And then I strongly recommend using RStudio, which is an integrated development environment. You see your code and your output together. It's got syntax highlighting. Again, you'd follow this link and just download for your appropriate platform. And then you need to install some packages. I try to not use too many packages. In this tutorial in R, you can certainly go overboard and use a million packages in every script. But so at your console or in a script, you'll need to run a line that says install.packages and then the name of the package. DBI is kind of the core of everything that we're going to be doing. It's a database interface that is sort of this standardized way for R to talk to different databases. The drivers that you need to talk to the on-farm database, you need the R Postgres package. However, just like 2 weeks ago, they released a new version that has a bug in it. So you don't want to download the latest version of R Postgres. So you have to install a package called DevTools. DevTools has a function called install version, so you can download this old version 1.1.1. I found that 1.2.0 was the one with the bug, and it would not connect to our database. It's just kind of a version problem. Hopefully it'll be sorted out soon, so look for an update to this page when that happens. And then another package that we're going to need is the R SQLite package. This basically installs a SQLite 3 instance on your computer. It's kind of a lightweight database that we can use for local database testing. And so those are the ones that you absolutely need. I'm going to strongly recommend that you also download dplyr and dbplyr. These are basically data formatting packages. They help you do things like add new columns to a table, or sort, or summarize things. And they're just really helpful for not having to learn how all the SQL works. There's this really helpful link, db.rstudio.com, which is a resource not just for databases in R, but also gives a lot of instructions about like how dplyr translates your R code into SQL commands that the database can run. So I definitely recommend perusing that link when you get a chance. And then there's some very much optional packages that I'm only going to be using kind of for demonstrations that you don't need to connect to the database. But if you want to follow along with every single step that I'm doing, there are some here for visualization and data manipulation, as well as making some maps. You're going to see a lot of this strange looking symbol here. It's called the pipe operator. There are a lot of new R code that's coming out that uses what's called the tidyverse style, that uses this pipe operator. It's for function composition, so kind of read your code out loud and then say the word then every time you see it. So my example here is generate 5 random numbers, then sort them, then take the absolute value, then take the square root. And so it's exactly the same as doing square root, absolute value, sort, rnorm 5. It's just a little bit easier to read because you don't end up with all these stacked up parentheses here. You can certainly write your code either way. It's totally a stylistic thing. You can still use dplyr without using the pipe, but I will be using the pipe quite a bit in this tutorial. It's really helpful for the so-called table verbs, or multiple table verbs of dplyr, which we'll get to when we talk about joins. But the really important ones are filter, which is for filtering out rows based on conditions, select, which is for choosing columns based on names, mutate, which adds columns to tables in the database, group by, which groups observations of rows and then perform some operation on them, and then summarize. So you can take those groups that you just made and collapse many rows down to a single row. So for example, taking the average of some measurement, something like that. And so you can kind of go through this and see a little bit about how that really works. There are lots and lots of tutorials online about using the pipe operator. But we will then jump into setting up our local database and learning how to interact with it in the next tutorial.